Hi, y'all. This is House Guest, and I am your host, Kenzie Elizabeth. Think a Gen Z wannabe Martha Stewart meets Dolly Parton trying to live in a Nancy Meyers movie in her 20s. We talk all about life, relationships, navigating your 20s, closing at the bars, or waking up at 5 a.m., depending on our vibe that week. Ultimately, living our best lives and figuring it out along the way. So come hang out. Sometimes I have guests on who do really cool things, some of my best friends, or it's just me and my house that I spend way too much time in. So let's get into the show. I'm so happy that you're here today. I don't think we've ever had a better fit for a guest ever on this show.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. No, I'm so psyched to be here because we love the same people. We talk to the same people, and I'm so psyched.
It's so exciting.
I'm a huge
Also,
fan.
Fellow homebody.
Yes, completely. I love if I can be pulling the covers up right under my chin around 9 o'clock at night with the dogs on the bed and like just my little bowl of blueberries next to me because I'm just so extreme, right? I am so happy.
It's so incredible.
Yeah.
I need like a matching pajama set, robe at the ends, like my slippers by the bed.
Better and better.
So
I love it. I
incredible.
love it. I just don't get it. I just love being home, curled up, is safe, cozy. Yes.
It's just amazing.
Yeah, I'm with you.
We have so much to talk about. I really do want to get into your NYU course.
Okay.
But something you were just sharing with me is that you actually are getting attacked quite a bit with your column about defending Gen Z.
Well, every single time I write for the Wall Street Journal, not every single day, but of course I, like other people, have op-eds, and every single time I typically write about Gen Z, which is the generation I experience in the classroom and that I work with, and my columns typically say, let me explain this aspect of Gen Z to you because you're encountering them in the workplace, and I say, I'm generally I've been accused of being an apologist. I just think I'm a translator to say this is what they say and this is how you hear it, but this is what I really think is going on, right? And in the comments, it's people are, these are not young people. They're people my age or sort of middle age, whatever, and they're just on a tirade about how Gen Z is just the worst generation, and I can't stand it. And so I look at the comments, and I have friends who say, Suzy, never answer the comments, but I go in there and I answer the comments. And you know who else does it? I have a daughter who's in her 30s, and she's fierce, and she goes in and she says things like, wash your brain out with soap. How dare you speak to my mother that way? She goes in and one by one tries to pick them off. That's a good girl, huh?
No, I love that. What are some things that you're defending Gen Z over?
Well, I think that there's this pervasive attitude that Gen Z, I think you've heard it. I almost hate to say the words, that they're lazy. And my pushback is they're not all of them are lazy, but the appearance of laziness comes from their reluctance to sort of throw it all in for a company because they saw what happened to their parents when their parents threw it all in for a company and then got laid off in their 50s or, and the family blew up because of it, or that they see their friends throw it all in, give everything to a company and then have terrible work-life balance. And so it's not laziness. It's a kind of skepticism about giving your life to an organization because they're not going to give it back the way you're giving it. And I think that's a healthy skepticism. I think they have the right to ask those questions. We asked a ton of questions, so why can't they? I think we've got to give my generation or people who are running organizations have got to give some reasonable answers. So that's a typical one. That it's the laziness, it's the just lack of interest in work. And actually the thing that really gets people riled up is this sort of coming in late and not coming to meetings on time, and they're like, "What? Why aren't they following the rules?" And my answer is, they have a different kind of relationship with rules than we did. We hated rules, but then we obeyed them, and they hate rules, and their MO is to ask questions about them.
I think those are all very, very valid points. Something that I haven't even thought myself. Because I will even fall into it of like, is everyone really lazy,
Yeah, right?
And obviously there are exceptions to everything. There's lazy people in every single generation.
Of course.
I just feel like we as a society are always attacking the new generation coming in. They're never as good as that generation. They're always lazier. They're always, and I think I think you're right. I think it's that they have questions and that they're upset that they don't want to be exactly what these people are.
Yeah, I think something else is going on. I think that the pandemic raised all these questions. It raised all these questions about where we work, why we work, how we work, with who do we work with. Raised all these questions, and then it didn't answer them. And so all these feelings and questions got stirred up. And maybe if the pandemic hadn't happened, that generation would have kind of marched forward and continued going to school and all, and they would have gotten onto some kind of conveyor belt. But the conveyor belt went off the rails. And then everybody was asking all these questions. And then the previous generation said, okay, let's move on. It's over. But the Gen Z was like, wait, those questions are still in our head. And I think a lot of what happened during the pandemic was, of course, this topsy-turvy thing that happened was one of the questions that got raised is like, how long do you wait in your life to live the life you really want? Is that postponed till you're 40? Is that postponed till you're 60? And previous generations have been like, look, you earn the life that you want to live. You earn it. You work really hard. You make a ton of sacrifices, even for decades. And then you kind of get the life you want. And one of the questions the pandemic raised legitimately was like, well, can't you do that sooner? I want to have fun employment. I want to have fun between when I'm employed. Like this was this is heresy to my generation. I wrote a column about fun employment. I thought people's heads would explode. And my head exploded the first time I heard it because I've been unemployed in my life. I got fired once and so forth and so on. Everybody gets unemployed at some point. And for me, it was like all I did was think about getting employed again. And my students talk about fun employment like, oh yeah, I got unemployed. I'm going to take 6 months to go to Bali. And I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? When you're unemployed, it's when you lose your mind. And they're like, no, why? Why wouldn't you just go do something fabulous? Why not? Why would you postpone that? And so I think part of what Gen Z is struggling with is just how long do you postpone?
Absolutely. I also think with the way that social media has grown, we have so much more access to conversations around this. So people have come together.
That's great.
Also, we have access to seeing people in different career fields.
Yeah. I mean, these are great points. You just know everything. Yeah. And you think like, look at that young, fabulous person who's my age, who's living that spectacular life, even though it's sort of manufactured. But, you don't know that. And you look at it and you think, I want that life. Why can't I have that life? And why do I have to wait to have that life? And it can, FOMO is real.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about your course.
Yeah.
Can you take us through the origin story of even how this came to be?
Yeah. So I teach a class. It's called Becoming You, Crafting the Authentic Life You Want and Need. I teach it at NYU. I also teach it outside of NYU to people who don't go to NYU because there's been interest in it, and it kind of drove me crazy that people said, I need this class. I need this class. And I was like, okay, fine. And I went to NYU and they're like, okay, fine. So we were able to organize that. But I would say, so the class is mainly taught at NYU throughout the entire university. And the origin story is I had a very interesting career myself. I started off as a reporter at the Miami Herald. It was super exciting. One thing led to another, and I was reassigned to business. And I ended up going back to business school. I went to Harvard Business School, which was a great experience. And I went into business journalism. And I had a great career as a business journalist. I was on CNBC and the Today Show, and everything was going along incredibly well. I got to start a business and run a business as I was being a business journalist. It all worked out very well, wrote lots of great books, and I had a very successful career, much of it with my late husband. And so that's the key word there, which is the word late. So life was going along very splendidly. My kids grew up. I have 4 kids, and I was at that point on the Today Show mainly. And in 2018, my husband got really sick. And we had a great marriage and a great love affair. And this was not what you ever see coming. And I stopped working because we very quickly ran out of options in our life. We understood that there was not going to be a future for him. And I stopped working in that period. And then he died and the pandemic hit in that literally he died March 1st, 2020. And the pandemic hit, of course, like 2 weeks later. So I went to the woods with my kids and their spouses. And then and I thought, I'm never leaving the woods. I am sad. I'm different. I can't imagine a life without him. I don't want to go back to daily TV. I don't know what I want to do with my life. And I really had this gigantic crisis, like, who am I and what do I want to do with my life? But that was fine to have during the pandemic, frankly, up in the woods with your children. And then the pandemic ended and my kids went back to their lives and I was still up in the woods walking my dogs. I mean, to the point where my dogs were like, another walk? Are you kidding us? And this went on. And then thank God, because I was lost, okay? I was like, who am I? What next? Do I start my own company? Do I do this? Do I do that? Do I write? And thank God the Today Show called me and said, will you come back on? And so I went back on and I loved being in the studio again, and it's a great environment and nothing but love. But I knew I had changed so profoundly that I had to do something new and different. And I had in my mind for a long time, starting when I worked for the Oprah magazine, and I had been a careers columnist there. I'd had this idea that there needed to be a methodology about how to figure out what to do with your life, because you're told, go do this, go do that, go find your purpose, and you get all this advice, but actually people don't need advice. They need a methodology because the answer is in them. They just need to excavate it. And I had come up with that methodology, thinking and studying and writing over many years, and working in many at the Harvard Business Review and then at Oprah and so forth. And I'd come up with that methodology. And one day a friend of mine wrote me to check in on me after he hadn't heard from me for a while. And a lot of people check on you when you've lost your spouse. And he checked in on me and he said, by the way, Suzy, I'm an adjunct professor now at NYU, blah, 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 blah. But that was all I heard, because he said the words professor at NYU. And I thought, wait, maybe that methodology is something that I could bring to young people at NYU in my backyard. So I had known the dean because I had been in academic writing, and I made an appointment with him. He had no idea what I was doing showing up in his office. And I said to him, look, I have this idea for this class. It's going to be called Becoming You. And it's a very scientifically backed 13-part methodology that brings people to a place where they know what they should do with their life. And I described it to him, and he stared at me and he said, I wish I'd had that class when I was in school. And I said, so do I. That's why I created it. And everybody should have this class when they're in school, because you're paying a lot of money to go to school, and then you're taking things like Italian cinema and sociology and business analytics, and you're like, what? So he said, well, let's try it as an experiment. And we did, and it was a very happy and successful experiment. And then it took off. It became kind of a phenomenon, and now I teach it widely. So that's the origin story. It's kind of meta. I was the first beta tester, because as I did Becoming You along with my students, all the testing, all the exercises, all the activities, really experiential, I was like, holy cannoli, like I am doing what I should be doing. I should be teaching this class. It's where I belong, and is my purpose, and it ended up to be exactly that.
It's incredible. I wish that I had a class like this in college. I don't even think I really realistically use any of the classes that I took in college, Can you go into a little bit of finding your own core values?
Yes.
I have people writing in all the time saying, I love everything that you're saying on the podcast. This is great. But what do you do? I don't necessarily feel lost. I just don't even know where to begin.
Yes. And let me tell you this. When I was working for the Oprah magazine, I wrote a lot about values and how your career should grow out of your values, but not just your values. Your career is what you should do with your life lies at the intersection of your values, your deeply held beliefs, your aptitudes, what you're actually good at. Okay. I mean, you are uniquely good at something, and it's one of your, there's cognitive aptitudes, like how your brain is wired. And then there's personality aptitudes, like how you show up in this world. That's what you're good at. You've got to identify that. And then what you're interested in. Okay. So just to say it again, what you should be doing with your life lies at the intersection of your values, your aptitudes, and your economically viable interests. Okay. And my class takes you through each one of those. But let's start with values, because when I talked a lot and wrote a lot about values, I would give Oprah used to put all the columnists on the road, and we'd travel from city to city. It was awesome. And you'd have these huge auditoriums, and I would get up and I would talk at that point. I talked a lot about decision making. And I would say, but you need to know your values, blah, 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 blah. And then I'd be finished talking, and there'd be this long line of women, and they would say, wait, I got you up until the part about values, because I don't know my values. How do you find out your values? I think I might be living by my husband's values or my parents' values. Like, wait, what is a value again? And I started to get this suspicion, like, wait, there's no common language around what values are, but values are very, very distinct things. I had done a lot of reading, studying, and writing about values at that point. And so actually, interestingly, when I got to NYU, I said, oh, wow, I have a whole research apparatus finally at my fingertips. How spectacular. This is one of the great things about being an academic now. I'm going to do some research to find out how many people know what values are and how many people know their own values, actually can name them. And the research came back this way. 17% of people know what a value is, and only 7% know what their own are. Okay. And this confirmed for me a very long held belief. And the reason is that first of all, you're never taught what values are. You go to school, you can come out, you'll know the volume of a cylinder, okay, and you'll know like how to play the recorder, okay, but you will not know. Right? I know that song. Why? You'll know like donc, où est la bibliothèque? Okay, like all sorts of BS that they teach you. Like that's what I remember from French, okay? But you will not know what a value is or what yours are. Okay, so listen, just to cut to the chase, there are 15 core human values, well established, okay? 15 core, and everybody has some level of each one. And you have a values DNA profile. You don't have to randomly pick your values out of the sky. Values exist. Like for instance, a common value with some people is something that's called work centrism. And that's work as an organizing principle of your life. Okay. If maybe it's family centrism, family as an organizing principle of your life. Hey, but it may be something called beholderism, which is caring a lot about how things look, including you and your house, right? I have very high beholderism. I care how I look. I care how my house looks. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's a value. Some people have a lot of it and some people have none of it, okay? And so there's these 15 core human values and people struggle to describe what their values are and they end up saying two things over and over again. They say family and financial security. And that's all very well and good, but how much family you want to see and how much family I want to see are different. And we both would name family as a value. And how much we care about financial security. I mean, I have kids who say, look, I just want students who say, okay, I want financial security. And I ask them what it means. And one student will say, I just want enough money to rent the apartment above my shop. Okay. And another person will say, okay, I want a helipad for each kid. Mm-hmm. Okay. Those are two very different definitions. So the key thing is to find out what your values are. I mean, I myself invented a test. You can take it for free. It costs you nothing, and it's 100 questions, and you can finish it in 15 minutes, and you will know your top values. You will know you'll know in what order. You'll know what conflicts they have with each other. You'll know and you'll know this. There's sort of a little terrifying number that you also know, which is of what we call your values variance, which is the difference between how much you're living by your values currently and the difference between how you're living right now and how you want to be living. That's a scary number sometimes.
Wow. Yeah, I need to take that quiz.
Okay.
I would say I have an idea of what my values are. And I do feel as though I've built a career in life around the things that I do feel like are fulfilling and aligned and of service. Yes. I do feel like I have a generally good idea. Yeah. But I need to take the quiz because I'd be interested to see because maybe it's completely different.
Let's talk about some of them for a second. Okay. So one of the values, I'm just picking this up off of you. And I listen to you and I'm a big fangirl. So one of the, there's one value that's called achievement. It's pretty obvious.
Absolutely.
Okay. Right off the charts. Are you not? Okay. Like for some people, I have had students say to me things like, I don't care what I do in this world. I just have to have success. I have to have achievement. It matters to me. I want an achievement's about the outside world saying you're a success. Okay, so I think that's value.
I would say so. Yeah. I'm an Enneagram 3 as well. Like
you're an achiever
personality type. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love my students all take the Enneagram. But I think also there's another value. This sometimes goes along with achievement, but sometimes doesn't. But I think you have it, and that's radius. And as if your life was a asteroid and your life hit the earth, how big a crater would it leave? You've changed people's lives. You've had a big impact. Some people don't care. They want to, if they help their kid or they help one person, that's enough. Radius is when you really want to change or improve the lives of a lot of people or a system. People who are high in social justice are high in radius. And I think your radius is probably pretty high.
Well, because this is so achiever of me, but as soon as you said that, I was like, well, yeah, because I want to scale my impact.
That's right.
Know?
That's okay. So that's exactly. So I think there's sort of a archetype of people who have as organizing principles achievement, radius, and then how about work? Do you love work?
I love work.
Yeah. So this is work centrism. I think would be really high for you as well. Mm-hmm. There's another value that sometimes tracks with this and sometimes doesn't. It's called Luminance, and I'm just going to be blunt. It's how famous you want to be, okay? And so I had a student who was presenting the other day in class, and she said, I'm just going to come in here and tell everybody my number one value is Luminance. And she talked about the story of her life. The last thing students do in my class is they tell the story of their life for the next 40 years, and they do it with slides and all sorts of stuff. It's so much fun. It's so cool. There's never a dry eye in the house. And she literally told the story of her life by visualizing it with text between her and Kim Kardashian. But she was like, that's how famous I'm going to be. And I don't know how that plays out for you. What do you think? Do you care about it?
I think I care about it to the extent of making an impact and being able... I almost view having a platform very similarly to how I view money. Like it gives you freedom in a way.
Right.
Gives you freedom, but then also gives you the complete opposite of that. But I like it for being able to have different platforms. With that being said, I don't necessarily want to be someone that's talked about. My friends and I were actually at dinner last night talking about this. I like where we're at. I obviously want to grow for my career, but I don't want to be someone that's like talked about in the zeitgeist where people are like attacking my, and I understand there are things that happen already, but
you give up your privacy and your security.
I don't want to be Kim Kardashian. Like that's not.
Yep.
That's not the goal.
So there's two values that are really in conflict, and I wonder where you fall with them. One is what you just mentioned, which is freedom, and that's agency. That means you have the ability to completely control your own life. It's about how much flexibility you can get for yourself, how much self-determination you have for yourself. But you know what sometimes conflicts with that is belonging. Like how much you want to fit in, how much you want to be with your friends, how much you give up so that other people get their way. And so it'd be very interesting to see where you or your listeners fall on both agency and belonging. I think for people who are in their 20s, this is the struggle in our minds. Is like, I want freedom, but I want to be with my friends all the time. And you can actually even sort of feel that in your chest, that conflict. It's like, how much alone time do I want? How much belonging do I want? We struggle with figuring out that right balance, all of us.
Yeah, I definitely struggle with that.
Yeah.
Also, I'm very, very family oriented. I'm incredibly close to my family. Yeah. I took my dad on this trip.
I love that.
Very, very close. Right. So I do feel that. I've also struggled with that in my 20s. I think for so long. I started my YouTube channel when I was 16. I've been in this world for 10 years at this point. And for so long, like I had agency. My career always came first. And then I got to a point where I realized like how unfulfilling it is when I didn't have the kind of friendships that I wanted. No, I got very lucky. I have amazing friends that I grew up with that I still have to this day. So it wasn't like I was in a situation where I didn't have anything. But I just recognized in myself that my career isn't the only thing that fulfills me, and I wanted to create a big life outside of that, with the career not being the center focus of my life. It is something that I personally have to do in order to be like happy on this earth. But I definitely struggle with that because I would say even from like 22 to, I'm 27 now, probably 22 to 25, 26, I was more so like in the belonging of like, I feel like I want to experience this. And now I'm definitely shifting back to agency, and like my social life is like a little bit on the back burner.
Yeah, you know, you're making these incredible points because really all the values when you're in your 20s specifically are like levers, and you're moving them and you're tweaking them and you're figuring out where your absolute happy place is, where your authenticity is. Like one of the things you have to figure out is your relationship with fun. This is a value that we call eudaimonia. It's like how much you want self-care, how much you want pleasure for yourself, how much you want recreation, how much, you know, how important like sex is. Okay, that's all part of eudaimonia. And you have to figure that out. Your 20s are often when you figure that out. And the key thing in your 20s is to make sure that if you're entering into a partnered relationship, that the person that you partner with has the same level of desire for eudaimonia as you do, like how much time they want to spend having fun and other, you know, sort of pleasurable things. And the other one you've got to figure out is how do they have the same level of work centrism? Because when you run into trouble in your 30s, it's because you had different levels of eudaimonia and work centrism.
That is so interesting.
I know. That's why we do Becoming Us, because the minute people do Becoming You, this class, okay, I got to get my partner in here to do it. I got to get my boyfriend to do it. I need my girlfriend to do this. I want to do it with somebody. I want to compare our values profile. And it was just literally, we said, okay, let's just start something where people can do it together.
Now, are your values set in stone or do they shift?
No, they do shift. I mean, there's some really fundamental values, family being one of them. Is sort of like how much you need and want to be with your family. I mean, I had a student who just today in class said, I have very low family centrism. If I see my family 3 times a year, that's fine with me. That's probably not going to change in her life, okay? But sometimes families, and it may not change for you, like just the fact that your dad's with you on this trip is a huge marker.
I talk to my niece every day. She's I really don't see that.
Yeah, right. I don't see that shifting. But there are times where people have very low family centrism and then they have a kid.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? You know, what was I missing? Okay, now everything is about the kids. And actually, I have a really good colleague, and he and his husband were single. They never thought they were going to have children. And then an incredible thing happened. They were able to adopt 2 sets of twins. And he said to me, up until this point, I had no idea what I was living for. It's about the girls. And being a father is my number one. And he literally had a values like from 0 to, off the charts in the course of sort of 2 years of his life. That can happen. But other things like how much we need freedom and how much we need to be able to drive our own car, that agency, that's almost a personality trait. So each one is a little bit different.
Yeah, I think about being a mom, my family every day. Yeah. I'm single.
Yeah.
You know?
I know. But, sometimes like even when I was growing up, I knew I was going to have kids.
Yeah.
I wouldn't feel complete until I had them, and then they came along and I learned what it meant to have all those kids, 4 kids. But I mean, I knew I had to have them. And in fact, when I had 3, I thought I'm not done till 4, even though it was so hard. But anyway.
See, I always knew I would have kids eventually, but I don't feel like I had this strong desire until my niece was born. And that's when I realized that her being born was when my mind was like open to, honestly, I feel like it really shifted my family like value, because that is when I realized like what a child does to this this world, you know?
Yeah. I mean, people often go through Becoming You and they finally face into two values that are really important. They face into their value of how much money they want. Okay. A lot of times that's a stealth value. We don't admit it to ourselves. We say things like that we think are socially acceptable, like, no, money is not that important to me. And in fact, there's something inside of them, a little voice, which is like, money is super important to you. Okay. And so one of the things that the process does with all of its tests and activities is sort of have you confront how important money is, to really put almost almost quantify where is affluence, is the term we use. Where is affluence in your list of values? Is it number 1 or is it number 7? Where is it on the list? And the other is around how important it is to create your own family. And I'm dealing with people in their 20s every day. And, it's not that cool when you're like 20 years old to say, like, I really want to get married and have kids, right? It's easier to say I want to have a great career and so forth. But a lot of times people come out of the process and they say, okay, look, I have to come clean with myself. I got to go start looking for a partner, because actually a huge part, there's a hole inside me that is family sized and I got to fill that hole.
Absolutely. Yeah. Money is definitely up there for me. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It also, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And money allows you freedom and allows me, like, I was able to self-fund my own brand and build like my dream brand starting at, I was 25, 26 years old doing that because I was able to make money. Like, I just think that money is freedom.
Yes. And some people feel, and I think that's 100% legit. And what I say about all values, I'm a values agnostic. If you're not hurting anybody with your values, and you are clearly not, then you have a right to your values. And there's other people who interestingly say, having no money is freedom. And this is all what you have to know this about yourself. I mean, the whole process of Becoming You is about painting a self-portrait of yourself. So when you're standing still, so that when you're running, you know which direction to go. Because if you don't know these things about yourself, you're just all over the place. If you don't know where you're going, any old road will do. So that is what you got to avoid, I think, because you don't want to take too many detours. You're going to take some detours because you're in your 20s, and that's the detour generation, decade, but still.
Yeah, that's actually incredible. So once someone finds their values, like, what do they do with that?
Yeah, well, they got to put it into the formula along with their aptitudes and their interests. I don't ever want anybody just to take their values and go figure out what to do with their life, because you say your values end up telling you that, you should be, I'm just going to make something up, like you should be in marketing at a tech company. I mean, your values all add up to that. Maybe their achievement, their affluence, their work centrism, and you want to go into a really your values would say, go into a fast-moving tech company where you're going to be really rewarded in the marketing division for your creativity, because you really value creativity. And then you find out with your aptitude, you're not good at any of those things. And so you got to put into the mix your aptitude. So there are 8 big cognitive aptitudes that tell you things like whether or not you're a generalist or a specialist, okay? Whether you focus on things in the future, you're focused more on things in the present. I mean, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, whether you are really good at process or really terrible at process, these are actually hardwired into us, the cognitive aptitudes. They are the most studied part of psychology. This is not woo-woo. There's nothing woo-woo about it. So you've got to figure out what you're good at. How good are you at meeting new people? How good are you at integrating into teams? And you have to find out also, here's the hardest part, how you show up in the world. Because one of the hardest lessons that I have to communicate to my students in their 20s is that your personality, how you show up in the world, is not the adjectives you use to describe yourself. I'm kind, I'm a good listener, I'm generous, I'm collaborative. Actually, maybe, but your personality is how the world experiences you. And so you have to find out how the world experiences you. That's the work of your life. You can spend until you're 60 sort of getting knocked on the head as you find out how the world experiences you, or you can do testing. And so I make sure everybody goes through testing to find out how the world experiences you. It can be brutal or it can be the best day of your life, because first thing you do in the testing is you assess yourself on sort of 3 different categories: how you are in your relationship, how good is the quality of your relationships with people? How good are your ideas? And how good is your word? Like, how well do you execute things? And then you send it out. We have a test. It's very inexpensive. It's like cheaper than a cup of coffee. And you can send it out to up to 40 people, and you have them fill out this very, very quick test. And you find out the gap between what you think about yourself and how the world experiences you. And for some people, they think, oh man, I actually thought I was not this good with people, but I'm great. But for other people, they're like, wait, I thought I was fantastic with people, and I guess I am not experienced that way. And so these what you're good at, now look, you can change it. That's the beautiful thing. Whatever you find out, go ahead, tweak it, improve, work on it. But to figure out what you should do with your life after you've figured out your values, which is unbelievably hard and unbelievably important work to do, but it can be done. You can do it, is then move on to figuring out what your brain is wired to do really well, because it's so much more enjoyable in life to do what you're good at than what you're not good at. And the way I love to illustrate this is sort of imagine signing your name with your non-dominant hand. You can imagine it. You've had to write with your non-dominant hand, like, it's sort of wacky. It's very unpleasant. Your handwriting looks terrible and you go, oh, I hate that. And then if you switch the pen over to your dominant hand and sign your name, you're like, that's what I should be doing. Yeah, those are like your aptitudes. What you're wired to do is what you should be doing. And by wiring, again, I mean what your brain's wired to do with its cognitive aptitudes and what your personality is. You got to lean into that, because to be working against type is it's like holding your breath, and you just can't hold your breath for that long.
I'm curious to see what you have to say about what I'm about to say.
Yeah.
So, and these are more specific skill sets on not just, overarching generalist, specialist. Yeah. So I was talking to my mom recently, and my mom is an interior decorator and has been my whole life. And I texted her the other day and I was like, I'm so tired of seeing ugly Christmas trees. Like, I cannot believe that these people, like, it's just so ugly. Like, how are people like messing this up? And she was like, LOL, it's so funny, whatever.
Yeah.
And then it got me thinking, like, sometimes the things that I think sometimes it's hard to figure out what you're good at, because a lot of the time it comes naturally to you and you can't understand why like other people don't do that, because you don't recognize that it's actually a life skill that you have. That's right. Or a gift.
Yeah.
It's just your normal.
Yeah, no, that is such a great observation. And, we always edit ourselves, but we are often all the answers are in you if you've got a methodology to extract them out. And so I would say your visceral reaction to ugly Christmas trees, which I share, is actually a value of beholderism, which is like caring about how things look. Lots of people walk by those Christmas trees and they go like, oh, look at a Christmas tree. And you and I and anybody with high beholderism walks by and goes like, God, those colors are horrible. Why did they put those two colors? And you have a really acute sense of aesthetics,
and like,
right?
It should be telling a story. It should look like
right.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And it doesn't surprise me at all that your mom is an interior decorator.
Yeah.
You're wired.
Oh, it's like half my family.
Right.
That's where it comes from.
So you're wired for it. So you are, you're probably very, very good at that. But I think it's almost more a value than a skill, but it's both, because often values and skills go together, because we end up sort of doing stuff and caring about stuff that comes very naturally to us. And this is how we generally find out what we're good about. We sort of bump along in life. We try one job. We find it, I'm bad at that. I'm good at that. And you kind of iteratively find out, but you can find out sooner and faster if you pay attention.
Yeah, I think a lot of life, what I have found is my fear in life is failure. And to me, failure is just kind of letting life happen to me. I've separated it more from like work, because I'm, love achieving.
Yeah.
I've separated it from achievement in the work sense more so. And it's like, I want this big life that's very fulfilling, where I have freedom and I'm able to do all of these things and, do things that I love.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just...
All right, so look, let's just talk about that for one quick second, because I call this the 3 Ds, in that there's 3 ways to live life, okay? We can live by default, which is stuff just happens to us. And that's how 99% of people live.
That's my biggest fear.
Okay, that's what they bump along. And this happened to me, that happened to me. Oh, school's this, blah, blah, blah. And you live by default. It's just reactive. And look, it's so human to live in that D. But the second D is deliberation, where you start to have a little bit of intention around how you live, that you are, you make proactive decisions to sort of not live in default. Like, oh, okay, I'm starting to lift my eyes and look forward and have some kind of intentionality around my life. But the third D is what you want, which is living by design, okay? Which is like, you are the author of your life. You are not the editor. You're the person who's driving it, who's designing it, and who's living it. And that, look, I think everybody should live by design. I think that's very fulfilling. And you don't want to get to 65 years old and be at your birthday party and think, I just squandered it. I didn't live it. And I had this one wild and precious life, and I didn't seize it when I could have. And that's what you want, this big, wonderful, deliberate. It doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't.
Absolutely. Yeah, my biggest fear was the first one. That is what I would associate as failure for myself personally. Yeah. And that is what drives me crazy. Like, it's my actual biggest fear.
You are such an achiever. This is Enneagram. I so relate to you. Because I'm like off the charts as an achiever, also on Enneagram, which is the greatest test ever. I love it. And I mean, this is our that's our fear. And it's just failure and people thinking that we haven't lived or succeeded. It's just, and it's so in you. You couldn't knock it out of you if you tried.
Absolutely. You mentioned how we really have the answers within ourselves.
Mm.
So in order to find those, you would recommend like the test that you have, which we'll have linked, by the way.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, look, I think not tests necessarily, but a process which includes tests. So I think the answers are in you because you know your values. Only you can really excavate them. Only you can answer the questions. I have 6 exercises that we do, but there's the main one, which I told you about, which is the test. But there's other exercises. And then the second is only you can take the time to figure out your aptitudes, to take the test, to ask people around you. Can you please tell me what you think I'm very good at? Or even just do the testing where you send out we call it the Pi 360 test and find out how people really are experiencing you, or take a test like UScience, which you can get online. It's at uscience.com. I have no skin in that game. That's run by, I know the person who runs it, but they not related to me in any way. And that way you find out what your aptitudes are, and only you can figure out what your interests are. And for some people, they're like, oh man, I know my interests. I'm really interested in sports, or I'm really interested in finance or whatever. But other people, this is the biggest question. It's like, I don't even know what I'm interested in. And for you, only you can open your aperture and start understanding what's going on in the world to try to figure out what field you should go into. That you got to do that work. You can't outsource this. You just got to own it. And so, I think you got to have a process. Figure out those 3 things, which is an ongoing journey. It's not like you figure it out once and you never figure it out again. It's kind of a forever thing. You revisit every few years or whatever, and then you figure out what's at the intersection. That's where you got to be aiming yourself, I think.
And that's how you figure out what to do with your life.
Yeah.
So if someone cannot figure out for the life of them what their interests are, what are some things that they can do?
Yeah. So this is one of the hard things because you have to force yourself to be curious, okay? And with my students, I play this game called Industry Bingo, which is basically my fun, apparently tried to be fun, way to force them to learn about all sorts of different industries. But I mean, there are actually, here's some hacks. There's a government website that literally lists all 135 industries, and you just read down all these industries. You can just Google what industries are there, and you could be bumping along them, and you'll see which ones are growing the fastest, and see, oh man, I didn't think about aviation, or I didn't think about nut farming. I mean, there's just a ton of different industries. There's incredible research. Sorry, but I'm an academic. So there's incredible research that shows that when kids come out of high school and they've been surveyed to know how many jobs exist, they say 5 jobs. And they typically sort of list their parents' jobs and the sort of 3 jobs they've seen. Teacher always shows up because they've seen teachers. They've seen police officers. Their parents are an interior decorator. They put that down. But there are so many industries, and there's so many types of jobs. There's so many companies. It's overwhelming. And so sometimes we sort of narrow down our aperture. But so you can find out what you're interested in. And then the thing you got to do is not edit yourself. So let me just tell you this story about my daughter. So when my daughter, who's now 34, was growing up, her name is Sophia. We actually thought she had a problem because she was obsessed with TV. And we used to whisper to ourselves, my husband and I, like, what are we going to do about her? All she wants to do is watch TV. And we'd be like, what? She's not like all the other kids. And we put her into science classes. We enrichment classes, tutoring. And all she wanted to do, she would come home and she'd run to her TV. And then at dinner, she would say things like really like crazy things. Like she'd be 13 years old and she would say things like, they've really miscast such and such a role in Mad Men. They should have cast so-and-so. And Jack and I would look at each other like, is she an idiot savant? Like, we just didn't know what the heck was going on. And she only cared about TV. She'd think and talk about it. She'd like read readers' TV digest. I mean, and we just thought, how bizarre, how sad. She's a wonderful, wonderful person. What will she do? So then she goes to college, and she's completely disinterested in college. She majored in poetry. She took random classes. She made a lot of good friends because she's a lovely person. But we were like, what will happen? And then one time I was visiting her in college, and I was wanting to have her go out to the mall with me to go get something. She needed new sheets. And she said, I just have to watch this show. And I looked across the room, and she was on her knees watching TV as if she was praying to the TV set. And thank God, at that moment, after 15 years too late, basically, I called my husband in the bedroom and I said, Jack, I've just had this eureka. What if TV is not the problem? What if TV is the solution? And he said, what? And I said, maybe she should go work in TV. So he said, oh my God, Suzy, that's genius. I mean, genius. I should have thought about it ages ago. So her show was over, and I walked up to her and I said, Sophia, what would you think about after you graduated, going to Hollywood and being with people like you who just think about TV constantly? And she said, would you let me? And that was the problem, is she knew her parents were like, she's got to get into some kind of standard job that we know the parameters of. We knew nothing about Hollywood. We were in business. And I said, yes, we will let you. I will go with you. And like 2 days after she graduated, literally, we got on a plane, we went out to Hollywood, and she had 7 offers because she was a genius about TV. She's still 14 years later in casting. I mean, you know the shows she's casted. You've seen the movies she's casted. She just went into casting and she went around for interviews. She just was a hustler. And they talked to her in the interview and they would say things like, in casting interviews, they ask you questions like, who would you cast differently in such and such a show? And she was like, and then she'd answer and they'd be like, okay. She got hired. And she moved quickly through casting. So it's like you got to, sometimes you know what field you should be in, but you've told yourself, I can't do that. I can't go into that field. But you can. Somebody's got to work there.
Absolutely. It kind of reminds me of what I say about hobbies because I'm just such a hobbies girl.
Yeah.
And I always say when people come to me asking like, what should I do? What should I pick up? It's always the things that I liked as a child. Like everything that I've gotten into or wanted to do as a child.
Yeah.
I love like needlepoint and making things with my hands. I grew up, my grandma was a seamstress. I always went to the shop and was doing that stuff. I grew up in Texas. I love riding horses now.
Right.
I was a juge reader. I read every single like Nancy Drew, Junie B. Jones book that there ever was.
Yeah.
I read like 100 books a year. Like everything that I do that's hobbies that I've been able to do so much of it because I've turned a lot of it into a career.
Yeah.
Those are definitely like elements to my career. Every single thing that I do, it correlates with something that I liked as a child.
Yeah. I mean, and in fact, there's fantastic research that shows that we know what we should do when we're in 7th grade. Okay. And that because we know ourselves so well and we're typically just doing fun stuff at that point. Guess where my son works? My son works at Dungeons and Dragons because he tried a lot of other jobs and he kept on washing out. He got fired and he just kept on getting nailed because he just didn't love it enough. And one day I just said to him, why don't you just call those people who run Dungeons and Dragons, which seems to be the only thing you like doing, dear. And he started off in customer service in the basement. He was just such a absolute fan that they said, okay, fine. He started working at an hourly wage and now he's like, running marketing, or has a big role in marketing there. He's been there for 14, 15 years. So it was his hobby and it became his life.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so I want to talk about your like 10-10-10 rule.
Yeah.
Because I feel like as we're going through this and you're figuring out what you need to do with your life, you're also going to have to make hard decisions. So can you take us through the 10-10-10 rule?
Yeah, so 10-10-10 is a decision-making system that I invented in 2005 or maybe even a little earlier than that has been an incredible foundation for me and it's actually it became very popular when I wrote a book about it that was very successful, and now it's taught in colleges and universities around the world. So 10-10-10 is a way to make your decisions where, a lot of times we make decisions by gut or we wait until there's no decision to be made and we get our back up against a wall and we run out of alternatives and the decision makes itself. And really life is just decisions, right? And either we make them or life makes them for us. And if you want a life that you're not living, if you have a life by default, then the decisions are just washing over you and you're like, but if you want to live with deliberation or by design, you've got to learn how to make decisions. Once again, not taught in high school and generally not taught in college. I mean, there's some decision-making classes, but typically you have to be in engineering school or in getting an MBA to learn true decision-making. But there are like 100 decision-making systems. So I like 10-10-10 because it's fast and easy, and I'm going to describe it to you in less than a minute, and everybody can go start doing it right away. Okay, so 10-10-10 is you've got a decision, you identify your options, all the different options you have with your decisions, you write them down or you have them in your head, and then you assess what are the consequences of each one of those decisions in the immediate future. That's 10 minutes, okay? It could be 9 minutes or 4 minutes, but it's the immediate future. The foreseeable future, that's 10 months. Like the future you can imagine, you have pretty good certainty about. It can be 8 months, it can be a year and a half, but we're talking, I call it 10 months. And then 10 years, that's the life you want to create, okay? So you look at every single one of those options that you have, you 10-10-10 each one, and usually the answer pops. The answer pops when you know your values, but to do 10-10-10 well, you kind of have to know your values. I mean, that's the little about it is that if you know your values, it's a very easy tool to use. So my advice always is get straight on your values and then use 10-10-10 constantly. And I was actually I've been on the Today Show long enough that Hoda Kotb has been doing some wonderful sort of offsite wellness retreats, and she brings speakers with her as one of the speakers recently. And I first introduced 10-10-10 on the Today Show after I wrote about it for the Oprah magazine. And a woman came up to me and she said, I raised my children with 10-10-10, and now they're raising their children with 10-10-10. That's how easy it is to put into use. Now, the first few times you do it, sometimes you have to write it down. You have to sort of stare at it a little bit, but you can start doing it incredibly naturally, and you can grab your life by the horns, and you can start living with so much more deliberation and design if you use it. I still use it. I used it the other day when I had a hard decision. I thought, okay, I can't figure it out. Where's 10, 10, 10? And I figured it out.
It just helps to conceptualize it so much better. Even just thinking in my 20s, I think, one of the number one things that come up in your 20s is friendship breakups, changes. Everyone isn't, it's like half your friends are married with kids. The other half of your friends are like living in their parents' basements. Yeah. It's a crazy, crazy decade.
Yes.
But I just think about that. I wish that I would have had that or known about this previously when it comes to like friendship specifically, because I think that's so helpful.
So I tell a story in the book about a woman who was in her 20s, and she'd had a longtime friend, and it's really about friendship. And when they were in college, they were roommates and they were really, really close. And then their values diverged and their lives began to diverge. They were in their 20s, late 20s, living in New York City. And one of the not the person making the decision, but her friend, had gotten with some guy in finance, and they had gotten some real money, and they were living in a very, very different way than the person who had come to me with her decision. And she said, I just actually don't even really like her anymore. I don't like their values. And yet we keep seeing each other as friends because of our history. Do I end this friendship? I'm with them and I hate him, frankly. And, I'm an artist. And at this point she was really living hand to mouth. She was like actually donating blood to like live, but she didn't want to take a job she didn't love. This was her choice. And she said, why do we keep torturing ourselves? And now we're at the point where we're not answering each other's calls, or I let it go into voicemail. We don't text back for days. And yet then we'll see each other. And she said, this is so painful. What do I do? I said, well, let's 10, 10, 10 it. And she had to sort of figure out what her values were. We sort of did that work. And one of her values was agency, but another value was really authenticity and living truly to her values, which is wrapped up in agency. And another value for her was voice. And she had a huge value around social justice. This is one of the reasons why this couple was rubbing her so much the wrong way. And so she said, what happens if I end the friendship in 10 minutes? Well, it's very awkward. There'll be some tears. I'll wonder if I was making a mistake. But if I stay with her, I will, it will be agonizing every time I see her, but I'll be pretty sure that I'm doing the right thing because I believe friendships should last. And then she talked about in 10 months how awkward it would be because they would see each other still at reunions and they still had mutual friends. And then in 10 years, it would be lost. And she'd always wondered what happened to her and, whether or not they gave up friendship. And we looked at all of the sort of data that this surfaced, and we looked at her values, and she said, you know what? I'm going to fight to keep this friendship. I'm going to fight to keep it on one condition. I can't see her with that guy. And so what she did is she actually had a really candid conversation with her. And she said, can we continue our friendship? Let's see each other once a year. Can we do it just the two of us? And the other woman, she thought she was going to lose her in that moment. She said, that is a great idea. He's not crazy about you either. And that's what they did. And they're still friends, and they see each other once a year and they reminisce. And that's how so they use 10 to 10 around a friendship issue. I think its application there is chef's kiss.
Yeah, that's actually incredible. Yeah. Do you think that, so I guess this answers the question, but people with different values can still be, do you think that you can still be friends with someone with different values?
With conditions. It's hard to be really, really close friends with somebody with different, look.
Absolutely.
Some of my close friends have different values, but the good thing about having the values conversation, having a values language is I don't personalize it. I don't say, you're this, you're that. I say, look, we have very different levels of eudaimonia, or we have very different levels on achievement. And in my case, because I love work so much, I often say things to my friends like, look, we just really view work differently. And it's actually saved friendships for me because we talk about the values and our absolute right to have whatever values we want. So yes, you can, as long as you understand that people have a right to other values. But sometimes, look, they have different values and it really rubs you the wrong way. And you think their value is kind of yuck. It gives you the ick, and you have to separate. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How would you recommend someone getting unstuck in life? They're listening to this podcast episode. They're feeling amazing. They're learning all these different things. And they're going to go put them into place. Where should they start if they're feeling very stuck?
Yeah. First of all, just love yourself, because this is so common. Okay. We all feel stuck. It's an awful feeling. We look around and we think, nobody's stuck but me. But so many people are. And I can't tell you the number of times I've been at parties or in work situations, and people who look like they have absolutely splendid and perfect lives will sort of come up next to me and say, I got to take your class, or I need to talk to you alone, because they're stuck and they just are not admitting it. So number one, don't beat yourself up. Okay, that's number one. Number two, you can get unstuck. That message is important for people to hear. You can get unstuck, but you got to do the work. Okay, you got to own that there's a process that you got to dive into. Look, there's other processes, there's other books, there's other people who have other theories. Mine is find out what your values are, understand which values are in conflict, figure out, have a list of your values and start to live by them or know what they are. Number two, find out what you're good at and start to lean into it and figure out what your interests are, and then say, well, what would be at the intersection of this? Okay. But here's the thing about getting stuck. No one is going to unstuck you but you. And that's sort of like but you think, I got myself into this. How could I possibly get myself out of it? Well, there's no knight in shining armor. You got to do the work to do it. It could be a slow process. It can be a painful process. And a lot of times we don't get it right the first time. And pivoting is scary. Change is scary. People who are in their 20s say to me, but I've already worked 2 years in marketing or in finance. I mean, it's all going to be for naught. And I was like, yeah, it's all going to be for naught, except for that someday in 40 years, you'll say, you know what? That's exactly why I had that experience 40 years ago. It all comes around. It all makes sense in the end. The most successful people in the world, I am convinced that the most successful people in the world have no compunction about writing down losses. Okay, I did that. It didn't work. Moving on. I don't have to, I'm letting it go. If you can write down your losses and say, I did something and it didn't work, time to move on, you are so far ahead of the game.
I agree.
Yeah.
I always say I think the best quality in a leader too is like decisiveness.
Yes.
And that's decisiveness. And you move on. You
Yes.
don't let it weigh you down.
Yeah. It's a kind of lack of sentimentality. Like I remember I said I was up in the woods with a house, right? And I bought this pretty house up in the woods. And after I realized I was going to go back to work and I was going to be a professor at NYU and all these other things, I looked at that pretty house and I said, this house was at the wrong time in my life and it's in the wrong place. It's too far from the city and no one's going to come up here and visit me. And I don't want this life anymore. And I had to call my friends and say, guess that house I just bought and put all that money into, I'm selling it. People were like, what? And I said, yeah. Okay, I am owning my life and I'm going to be very deliberate about this. I don't want a house is not going to drive my life. I want to go back to work. And I wrote down my losses and literally wrote down my losses. I mean, I wrote down my losses, but I wanted to live by design. And my losses were not going to define me. My future was going to define me.
I love that. So everyone loves advice for your 20s on this podcast. What is one piece of advice that you would give to someone currently in their 20s?
Okay. This is going to sound kind of vague and woo-woo, but hear me out. Okay, here's my advice to you. Everything is going to be okay. And even if it's not okay, it's going to be okay. There's this sense in your 20s that the stakes are so high and that if you do X, Y, or Z, there's no coming back from it. And there is coming back from everything. And the best news is that in your 20s, you're going to make mistakes. You are, sorry. And all the mistakes you make are going to be fantastic because where you are broken, you are the most valuable, the most powerful, the most helpful to other people. So there's this ancient Japanese art form called Kintsugi. I mean, it came in like the 1500s. It's ancient, okay? And what happened was there was this shogun and he broke a tea set and it must have been some tea set because he sent it to China to be fixed. And they came back and he said, I don't like this. It looks ugly. And so he turned to these Japanese artisans and he said, you have to fix this tea set. And God knows they must have feared for their lives. And they went and they repaired where it was broken with gold, like really precious gold lacquer. And they came back and they sort of presented it to say, look, it's not just fixed, but it's a metaphor for the places where we've broken and healed, how much more valuable those parts of us are than the shiny, happy parts. And the shogun was like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And then this art form was born, Kintsugi, right? Where broken vases or broken tea sets are filled with gold lacquer. And that's what your 20s are. You're going to be broken in different places. You're going to fail. You're going to fall down. You're going to screw up. You're going to get fired. You're going to have a bad relationship that doesn't work out. And then you'll have learned from it and you will heal. And then it will make you so much more valuable to those around you because you will be empathetic to them. You will be helpful to them. You will be dear to them in ways you wouldn't have been if you hadn't been broken. So everything is going to be okay. And even if it's not okay, it's going to be okay because you are going through one of the best things about your 20s. It's hard while you're going through it, but oh my God, the upside of it is the glorious stuff that follows.
I love that. That's like one of my favorite things I think that has been said on this podcast.
Glad.
That was
So glad.
incredible.
I mean, I think, I have to tell you this thing when I love Kintsugi, and I got this dream that to really bring this theory home to my students, I wanted in class for everybody to do Kintsugi. And so that would involve, there's little tiny Kintsugi sets. If you're looking for a Christmas gift, just Google it and tell somebody to get you a Kintsugi set. And it's a little tiny teacup. And then you take a little tiny hammer and you smash it, and then they give you the glue to put it together and the gold lacquer to put it together. And I thought, I need my students to actually physically do this to really own what I'm saying to them. It's one thing for me to explain it, but I want them to do it. And then I went to the dean and I said, hey, I have a project I'd like to do with my students that involves me having 65 hammers in a classroom. And he was like, hard no. Okay. So anyway, but I think that, I am always, every time I tell that about Kintsugi, people are like, I'm going to go do that someplace because I want to enter that. And I want all people who are going through their 20s to enter it because it is the truth.
No, that's incredible. I think everything that you're saying is just really incredible advice, and it makes it so much easier to conceptualize. Even what you were saying, I just think about the situation with the different values in friendship.
Yeah.
I think even just knowing your friends' values, it's similar to knowing your partner's love language. It just makes you understand them so much better.
And knowing their Enneagram, right? This like it's like somebody's Enneagram. You're like, oh, you're an enthusiast. No wonder you always you like the beginnings of things and not the end of things. You can't change them. And you know that about them. So look, the more you know about yourself and then the people around you, it just eases everything because there's so many fewer misunderstandings.
There was this person that I knew a couple years ago in my life, and I would always say to people, and I couldn't stand this person. Now I actually quite like her, but I started to like her once I understood her more.
Yes.
And I would always say to people around me, it's not her fault that just everything that I cannot stand in the person she is, like the things that I place negative value on, the things that I think are, the worst qualities in someone. And that's so personal. It doesn't mean that that's necessarily a bad quality.
Right.
Like, for example, I view showing up on time as something as a level of respect. Yeah, totally. Like that, and so not everyone does, right? And so it's just like, that's a dumb, small example. But I would always say, it's not her fault that just everything that I happen to dislike in someone, she has.
Right.
But then as I got to understand her and know her more, and this was kind of in a more like collegiate, like specific example.
Yeah.
As I started to understand her and like where she came from, where she was going, like it made me like her.
Yeah.
And to say, you know what, we're just different people.
That's right. And that's the whole beauty. I mean, like you got exactly to where you got to go. I mean, it's like, okay, this is not a value of hers. We're totally different on this value. And I mean, eventually you start finding out things you really, really like about her.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there are things about her. There's something to really like about everybody if you just can peel away your own dispositions around values. Not everybody can or should have your values. It's just the way it goes. I mean,
it's life.
It's life. And
it's a good thing, actually. You don't want everyone to be the same.
No.
I actually, not only did I like her, I actually really respected her.
Yeah.
At the end of it.
Yeah.
But what you just said about, when you get to know, it's hard to dislike someone. Like I always think, even just with like stupid internet hate, I think it's very rare that you would go sit down one-on-one and have an hour-long conversation with someone and leave disliking them.
Yeah.
I think you realize like we all have a lot more in common than we don't.
Right.
It's very, very rare.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a big exercise. Just from that one relationship, I learned so much about life. And I really like her and I respect her and I keep up with her. She doesn't even live in this country.
I just love it.
We cut that part out because it's obvious. I'm like, actually, I like first name, last name her.
Right. I know. Dude. And her name is. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just so true. Now, look, there's some values gaps you can't cross, okay? But not that many. I mean, as long as you just sort of say, look, we're different this way. I mean, this is a perfect story. And you got to a place, it's a great learning, right? Because then you sort of go into every relationship saying, I'm going to find something to like about you. And your world gets so much bigger. I actually have this theory about this, which is that every person you meet is a tile in the mosaic of your life. And that, no single tile is the whole mosaic. And we have to stop expecting our friends or our romantic partners to be the whole mosaic. That's dangerous. And like every single person is a tile. I'm not everybody's whole life. I'm just a tile in somebody's life. How fabulous just to look up and say, look at this spectacular mosaic. So I actually did a reel about this. you would think this would be a very uncontroversial thing, right? Like basically saying, stop judging your friends, see them as one of the beautiful tiles in the mosaic of your life, your splendid, complex mosaic, and everybody's a tile. I said this thinking this was going to be like, oh, everybody's going to go, oh, you're beautiful, Suzy. Instead, oh my God. And people are like, I hate this woman, because I hold my friends to the same standard I hold myself to. And I was like, okay, you're going to have 3 friends then. I mean, like, I don't want 3 friends. I want to know and have a million people in my life because I get something from everybody. And I hope I'm in a lot of people's lives. It's just a mindset. And so I think that she's now a tile in the mosaic of your life.
Absolutely.
And she's not the whole mosaic, but she's a tile. And
I also think the concept of I hold all of my friends to the same standard as me is quite dangerous, because why would you base who you are as a person off of a response from someone else?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense to me. Like, I have certain friends, like, I love to host. I have certain friends that I know that, like, their word doesn't really, like, they'll say they're going to come and they're not going to. I just know that about them.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, I don't know, I just feel like you can't do that.
Well, also, I don't know, it's like so arrogant. Like, I'm so flawed. Why would I want, like, I want to accept everybody else's humanity. We're all kind of just screwed up and have falls. Like, somebody asked me, I was trying to get somebody to come onto I'm the director of the Institute for Purpose and Flourishing at NYU, and I'm trying to get somebody to come onto my board. And she said to me, what are your blind spots? I said, how long do you have? And she said, well, I'm asking because I want to know if you're self-aware. I said, oh, well, you're asking the right person, because let me tell you about all my blind spots, blah, 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 blah. And at the end, she goes, wow, that's just great. And here are my blind spots. And like, why would you want to have somebody who's like, if you think you're so perfect that you're going to hold your friends to your standard, I want people who are human like me, so that we can bask in our humanity together and talk about how screwed up we are.
No, absolutely. Yeah. It's a very, like, self-righteous way.
Yeah.
I think there are definitely times where friendship just isn't right. But I don't think that even people that I have had fallouts with, even like more so recently in my life, like, I don't view them as evil people. The friendship just didn't work between us two.
Right.
And that's fine.
Right. That's absolutely a great way to go. Is like, why would you write them off as evil? Very few people, there are evil people, but very few people are sort of evil. They just had different reasons for doing things. And, it's, you got to just, it's very hard to judge people as evil. And once you start putting a lot of people in that evil category, you got to look at yourself and say, who made you the judge?
It's the common denominator as well in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I could talk to you for like 14 hours.
Yeah.
We are unfortunately at our end.
All right.
Where can all the listeners find you?
Okay, they can follow me on Instagram. I'm also on TikTok, but my Instagram is my main platform. LinkedIn. I have a one-day class where I teach this thing in New York City. It's coming up in February. You can check that out on my website, SuzyWelch.com. And I got a book coming out in May.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks for listening, guys.
So happy to be here.